If you change your mind, you change your life, just change your mind. The Lord loves you. He's standing with his arms wide open for you. Be encouraged, cause this day's for you. Don't you let this opportunity pass by you. Yeah. Change your mind.
The title of this message on today is simply put, Ghosted. And we'll get into the understanding of this whole word, because I know this may be new for some who have ever heard this term before. For others, you have heard this quite often. Even if you haven't heard it, you have done it at some point in time in your life. But as we jump into this, on last week, we celebrated 16 years as a ministry for Changing Your Mind Ministries. Now that we're jumping into year 17, it starts to make sense of everything that Pastor Jones has been pushing us throughout this entire year, especially culminating into this last series with dealing with our reality. We had to understand coming through 2023, when we was in the year 16, that we were going into this mindset of understanding what agape was, meaning that I am willing to do right by you. That was our focus in year 16. Now, in year 17, we're dealing with love, live, and serve. And if you're honest with yourself, these themes have been popping up all the time in CYM. It's just now we're kind of putting a little bit more focus on those three particular areas. Because we can all agree that when we went into this Dealing with Your Reality series, many of us were sleepwalking. Or better yet, you was operating in your subconscious versus your conscious. And if you want to understand that, it's simply this. Many of us have did this before. You have left work, got in your car, and by the time you realize you was at home, you didn't realize how you got there. You didn't hit nobody, you didn't run any traffic lights, but you made it home because you was dealing in your subconscious, because you have driven that route so many times. Your mind technically shut off and your subconscious took over. So you wasn't necessarily dealing in your conscious state. And so that's what that whole series with dealing with our reality was getting us to understand, is that we need to wake up and deal with what is actually in front of us. Because when we get to this point here, all of us have wasted so much time and missed on so many opportunities because we tend to do the following thing to people in situations that come up in our lives, which is basically we have ghosted them. And if you want to understand the definition of the term ghosted, it's basically this: the practice of ending a personal relationship with someone by suddenly and without explanation withdrawing from all communication. That's the definition that you'll find if you go look it up online. But if you get into a little bit more, and we'll talk about it, that it talks about a little bit as far as you ghosting someone in a romantic situation. A lot of times, again, you may not have used the term ghosted, but you use certain terms when you was dealing with someone, especially in a romantic situation where you told them, hey, it's not you, it's me. Because that was your way of getting out of the situation. It was like, look, I really don't want to have a lot of conversation with you. So, hey, just put it all on me, and we're going to go ahead and end this conversation right now. So the band over there looking at each other, y'all did that before? And so when you're looking at this whole theme and this whole term about being ghosted, what you have to understand, it does fall into a lot of times when you're dealing with romantic situations, but it also deals with how you deal with people at your job, how you deal with people in your family, how you deal with people at your church, because we've all done it. Some of us are doing it right now to somebody, or somebody has done it to us. Because one of the examples that I actually going to give you, me personally, at the time that I met my wife, when we were dating, we were like 19 years old when we met. This term ghosted wasn't in the equation or in our vocabulary. But when we were dating, We was on the phone talking and everything, and she asked me, she says, how many people are you talking to right now? And I don't know why I said what I said. I was honest because it was something about her that was intriguing to me that I was like, I can be honest with her. So I told her, I said, well, truth be told, I am currently, excluding you, talking to like 6 other people. Now, Grant, listen, I said I was 19. I was 19 years old, okay? 19 years old, sophomore in college. Hey. So, because it was something interesting about her, I made up in my mind, I was like, you know what? I want to see where this relationship can go. So what I ended up doing, out of the 6, I called 2 and said, hey, this is what's going on. I want to see where this goes. Hey, and ended it from there. The other 4 never called. And so from that standpoint, I ghosted the other 4. I don't know where those 4 people are at. They might be watching online or anything. Hey, I'm sorry, but I was 19. And so I had to go through that process. And so we do that same type of process with individuals. Things come up in our lives. We deal with those certain things. We end up ghosting people, even though a lot of times we may not be paying attention to it because of our actions. And that's from a romantic standpoint. But even within a working environment, even within a church environment, we do the same thing. You could be physically present somewhere but mentally gone when the person is talking to you. Many of you got coworkers right now that you do not like, or you might be the coworker that other people don't like at their job. They see you, but they don't see you. And it's the same example that happened here at this church. Like right now at CYM, I am responsible for like all the ministers, elders, anybody that comes into the ministry, not only being the assistant pastor, but as far as leading that particular group. And I asked April, come here for a second. And I'm bringing April up here because everybody knows that April is over our experience for Sunday Monday service. And what some people don't know as well is that a couple of years ago, we took this personality test for the ministers and everything. And what was so strange about it is that me and her are on opposite sides of the spectrum. I'm on the introvert side, like way over to the left. She's on the extrovert side on the other end. And what was so crazy about that test, it says that because of my personality trait and her personality trait, a couple of things can happen. If communication is not correct, the explosion that can take place between these 2 personalities can be great. But if they come on the same wavelength, they can do so much together because of the 2 sides that they come from. Now, there was a time where she spearheaded a program here at the church. I think it was the vision board party we had a couple of years ago. I didn't understand anything why we was doing a vision board party. And so I was like, I don't even know why we're doing this, anything like that. She's excited. She's doing everything to get it put together and everything. I'm looking over here like, why are we doing this? And so I showed up physically, but I wasn't here mentally. And it showed on my face. Like I literally ghosted her in the middle of her program. I'm sitting right up there on them steps on my phone while they're doing the whole vision board party. But the crazy thing about it is that I'm supposed to lead her. And so how can I lead her, but then I ghosted her in something that she needed my help with? And so it took some time. Like I had to, for one, I know if pastor's watching everything, he will admit to it. Like it's very few times that me and him have really just clashed with each other. But when I say he went off on me that day, that was only the second time in 16 years he's ever went off on me. And he made me really come to myself. He was like, the way that you behaved. He said, yeah, you was here physically. He said, but dude, you had checked out. He said, it would have been better for you not to even show up than to show up and not participate in what was going on. He said, so now you have to make amends with everybody that was in leadership to show them that you are the person that I chose to be my second. And so I had to go back to her. I had to apologize, but not only within my apology, I had to show it within my actions. And so I had to continuously talk to her, say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what you need help with. You need help with this. Even for today, I was supposed to be doing call to worship and offering and everything because I was taking her spot. But then she realized that I was preaching today, and she was like, hey, she texted me last night, was like, hey, can I go ahead and take that from you? And I was like, okay, cool. I said, you go ahead and do that. Let's take some stuff off my plate. I said, so I had to continuously give her things like, hey, you handle the schedule for all the ministers. I said, she does it better than I do. She gives it out to everybody that's a minister. No, you get your list 4 months in advance. People call me, was like, hey, Pastor Jay, I'm going to be out. Did you call her? Did you call April? I said, call her before you call me. Because she's handling Sunday morning service, she needs to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be at. But if I stayed in that mentality, thank you. If I stayed in that mentality of ghosting her like that, it would have put me in a situation to where we couldn't learn, and then there's friction within the leadership of this ministry. Because what you have to understand, there are going to be people that are going to come into your life, they're going to be there for a minute, and then they're going to disappear on you. But they shouldn't stop you from doing what God has called you to do. Because this quote right here that I got from this author, Faraz Kazi, he basically states in this particular quote, he says, some people are going to leave, but that's not the end of your story. That's the end of their part in your story. Understand, everybody's not going to give you a farewell send-off when they leave out of your life. But it doesn't mean that you need to stop where they left. You're not going to get a resolution on everything. Many of us in here right now, you're fighting for closure on something that God has told you to move on 2-3 years ago. And you still holding out hope on a person coming back to give you closure. But what you have to understand, that was just the end of their part in your story. Your story is still going on. But as I always give this, we're on the flip side of that as well. We were the end in somebody else's story. Just like you're the hero in all of your stories, sometimes you're the villain in somebody else's. Because we have to understand in Matthew 7:12, Jesus is saying this. He says, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Again, we want to make sure that anytime we come in interaction with someone, that we are doing our best to treat them right, because you want to be treated right as well. One thing that I would tell you that will make me ghost someone, let me go out to eat with you. And you show out at a restaurant. And you don't treat that wait staff the way they should be treated. You ain't going to have my food get spit in because you ordered something wrong. So if you ever like, well, man, like Pastor Jay ain't go out to lunch with us anymore and everything. Yes, because I ghosted you because I saw how you acted because you don't know how to treat people. And 9 times out of 10, I would tell you that as I'm walking out, like, hey, you ain't never going out to lunch or dinner with me again. Because it's something about how you treat people. You want that same type of respect, we need to give it to everybody. And so when we're looking at this whole term of ghosting, this whole thing, because again, it's a new term that has came out over the last couple of years to just basically sum up everything that we talked about. Because again, all of us have did it. I don't care how old you are, you've done it. It's just that you didn't use the term ghosted. But when you look at it from a psychology standpoint, basically what they're trying to get you to understand is that ghosting is abruptly ending communication with someone without explanation. Basically, you're wanting to avoid discomfort so that you can apply that across all situations. The reason why people tend to just leave, because a lot of times they don't want to deal with the tension of a situation. It's easier for me just not to say anything else to you and just walk out versus me sitting in this tension and having to deal with you on this situation. So I'd rather just leave. But then even when you look at it, again, from a romantic standpoint or work standpoint, it all sums up to this. You're really wanting to avoid any type of uncomfortable situation. I'm not saying that it's that you don't like dealing with conflict. I think anybody's weird if you thrive on conflict. You're a weird individual. If conflict jumps up and you're like, oh yeah, this is where everybody doesn't really like. I know you can handle conflict, but for you to thrive on when conflict takes place, it's a weird individual. You need to pray for them because something is going on that shouldn't be going on. And so when we're sitting here dealing with this is basically what it's saying is that you want to avoid any type of uncomfortable situation. Because when you're dealing with this whole term or this whole mentality about ghosting, psychologists have actually broken it down into 4 different areas. Those 4 areas basically stand as this. For one, you ghost an individual because it's convenient. It's easy. You don't want to deal with the situation. So the best way for me to get out of the situation, I just don't deal with it. As I stated before, if you were born, basically if you was dating and all that other stuff like that in 80s, 90s, early 2000s and stuff, the way that you ghosted people a lot of times, especially from women, gave them a different phone number. It was like, I ain't really want to deal with this situation, so let me just go ahead and give you my number. They dial that number, it goes to Pizza Hut. Oh, you say that happened to you, Keenan? What? And so again, it's convenient. You ghost someone because it's convenient. It's an easy thing. You don't want to deal with the uncomfortable situation. The second one is that it's fated attraction. You're in a situation, you get bored. And so instead of you dealing with the situation of your boredom, you decide that, you know what, I'm just going to slide right out of this situation. Your interest has fallen away. What you saw at the beginning has started to dwindle. And you're looking at yourself like, why am I still talking to this individual? I thought something was there, but there's not. The third one is undesirable interactions. Sometimes you'll ghost a new relationship because that person will offend you or put you off in a certain way to make your feelings change from attraction to repulsion. This could be from romantic, this could be from on your job, this could be from in your church, this could be within your family. Something happened to make your attraction or make what was drawing you to that person become from an attraction to now you're repulsed when you see them. They could have did something or said something to somebody else and had nothing to do with you, but you just overheard the conversation. It's like, I really don't want to deal with this person anymore. And then the fourth thing is safety. People tend to do this as far as ghosting an individual to basically safeguard themselves because they may feel that this individual is weird, creepy, the situation is not where I want it to be. I'm trying to safeguard myself. And so I will literally remove myself from the equation without telling you what's going on, and then basically hope that you just figure it out. And so this whole thing about us talking about ghosting someone or ghosting a situation, leading us up into what we're going to get ready to talk about in this scripture in Luke 9:57 through 62. Because when you jump into the book of Luke, now granted, we're here at church. Most of y'all was here at Sunday school, so I heard y'all from upstairs. You was either in here or you was in the marriage class, so we're going to have a little bit of Bible study. So you're going to talk back to me. So, Luke, and you understand how when we talked about how ghosting takes place from us in our day-to-day life in 21st century United States of America, how the same approach still took place in 1st century AD in Judea when we're talking about Christ and these three disciples. So when you get to the book of Luke, y'all tell me, who was Luke? He was a physician. What else about him? He wasn't one of Christ's disciples. He was actually a friend of a very important person in the New Testament that wrote to Paul. He was a friend of Paul. He was a physician, but he was also another thing as well. One, a tax collector. He was a historian. Luke wrote, of course, Luke. This whole letter that we're reading in Luke is actually written to one person, a friend of his by the name of Theophilus. Theophilus was a Greek who was getting ready to convert over to Christianity. So Luke decided in himself to pen out a letter to describe to him everything about who God was and who Christ was. Because you have to understand, in the Greek culture, they had a whole thing about understanding about different gods. They worship demigods. If you don't know what a demigod is, if you know anything about Greek mythology, a demigod was basically the person we know now as Hercules. Hercules' father was Zeus. His mother was some mortal or human person. And so they understood about demigods. So the way that Luke penned his letter, he was penning his letter to his friend to let him understand is that I'm going to introduce you into the real God. He's a physician. All of the Gospels explain the crucifixion of Christ. Luke's interpretation goes deeper because of his medical background. Most people who study the crucifixion of Christ, they will go to the book of Luke first because of the detail that he gives to it. To the point where you have to understand that the word that we get for excruciating, they did not have a word for that. They came up with that word because what took place for a person that was put on a cross. So for them to be able to explain to you what the person went through, they came up with the word called excruciating because the word was so intense that we didn't even have a word for it. He's also a historian. He wrote Acts. Acts covers 40 years of church history. All that stuff that you hear about Paul being shipwrecked, being stoned and flogged, bitten by a snake, the person that was right there beside him is Luke. All these accounts that you hear of Paul getting into situations, getting run out of cities, the person that's right there beside him writing the whole time is Luke. He got a piece of paper and some ink writing all this stuff down whenever they get to a city. You think about it in today's society, that's you running around with your iPad or laptop trying to type all this stuff that's going on with this individual. So here you have this book that we're in. We're in Luke. When you get to Luke chapter 9, there's so much going on in this chapter. When you have time, please go back and just kind of look at it because we got to give you context before we get to verse 57. The whole chapter of chapter 9 covers about 2 to 3 months. Jesus is going from Galilee down to Jerusalem. That is a 35-mile walk. To put that into today's term, that is like you walking from here, 9 Beth Drive, all the way over into Spartanburg past Westgate Mall. And you have to understand, they didn't have paved roads. The topography, mountains, valleys, rivers, creeks, wild animals, all over the place. This is a 35-mile walk. To kind of give you some context of what is taking place in this whole chapter. Because in your mind, we're thinking about driving. It was like, here, it ain't going to take me about 20 minutes or so. If you pulled up on your phone right now, how long that would take, it'll probably say 4 or 5 hours. Tasha said days. But here you have this situation. He's going from Galilee down to Jerusalem. All this stuff is taking place in chapter 9. Jesus sends out the 12. The 12 come back with good report. You have Herod, who was the one who killed John the Baptist, is now scared because now you have all these reports about this man doing all these great things, and they think John the Baptist done came back from the dead, but it's actually Jesus following the same footsteps of John the Baptist. And then you go from that standpoint to where he feeds 5,000. He goes from feeding 5,000 to the point where he then gets his confirmation from Peter declaring that he is the Messiah. Then he goes from there to predicting his death for the first time. Then he takes Peter, James, and John onto the mountain of transfiguration and shows them who he truly is. Then he comes off the mountain and then has to deal with the other 9 that are having a dispute with people because they couldn't heal a boy from being demon possessed, and Jesus has to deal with that. Then he has to turn back around and predict his death a second time. Then he tells the disciples, hey, we need to get to Jerusalem, but the way that we're going to go is not the normal way that people would normally go to Jerusalem. We're going to go through Samaria. And if you understand anything about the history between Jews and Samaritans, Jews considered Samaritans mutts. They called them half-breeds. They looked at them as less than. Because Jews went by the Old Testament, the law of Moses. If you was caught in adultery, man and woman, you supposed to be put to death. If they caught a person in adultery and there was a Samaritan right there, they would forgive the person who committed adultery and sentence the person that's a Samaritan to hell. Because they felt that the Samaritans, it was a group of Jews that when they got taken over in the Old Testament, they got assimilated into the nation of Assyria. They felt that the Samaritans diluted the bloodline because they was waiting on the Messiah to come. And they was like, you jacked up the bloodline. So that's the reason why when you read about the story of Jesus meeting the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, how he talked to her, how she talked to him, she was like, why are you even talking to me? You a Jew, I'm Samaritan. We ain't even supposed to be having discussion with each other. So Jesus decides, hey, we're not going to take the long way because for you to bypass the area of Samaria would have taken another 3 days to get to Jerusalem. Jesus said, we're going to go straight through this. We're going to deal with the situation. We know we Jewish. They know they Samaritan, but we're not going to run away from it. That's like you, again, walking from 9 Beth Drive all the way up past Westgate Mall, and you decide, you know what, I'm not going to go through Taylor's. We're going to take another route and go through Blue Ridge, which is going to put you up in the mountains. That's going to make your travel even longer to get to the same destination. And that's something that we should take from the Bible when you look at what Jesus does and how he interacts with people. He could have went the other way that everybody else went, but he decided to do this on purpose. Everything else that everybody else is running from, Jesus said, I'm going to run right toward it. And a lot of times he does that in our lives. A lot of times he puts you in situations where he was like, look, everybody else is running from this situation. but I'm going to gear you up so that you run right toward it. And so here you have now, verse 57. These verses can actually be broken up into three different parts. There are three different types of disciples that Jesus ran into. All three of them represent us. The first individual that he runs into, when you look at verses 57 and 58, this disciple I call the hasty disciple. He says, as they were walking along the road, a man said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus replied, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. The hasty disciple. What do you mean, Pastor Jay, the hasty disciple? Again, many of us have made decisions in our lives that we didn't think twice about. We didn't count the cost. I tell a lot of people when they come to me for certain things, like, you know, it could be for buying a car or whatever like that, and they say, well, I'm trying to get a house. I was like, many of us that went through the housing buying process know that it's a very tedious process. Buying a car is very tedious. But the crazy thing about it, they'll get you in a car. They ain't even going to put you in a house. If your stuff don't line up, sorry, you ain't going to get this. But for a car, we can move some stuff around, not realizing your interest payment is going to be 30%, but you got the car. Yeah, you worked that for it. You know, understand. You seen them interest rates on there. But the thing is, we've all been this hasty disciple. You full of zeal. You ready to do something. And you jump out there, and then you realize, this ain't really what I wanted. I'll have people come and say, hey, Pastor Jay, you know, I want to be a minister. Okay. Well, you're not happy for it? I was like, I'm happy that you're hearing from the Lord, but I'm not moved by that. I said, why do you want to become a minister? Because you want to stand up here? Depending on the church that you at, you may not stand up here a lot. So are you ready to put your life on display for people to have expectations of you that they haven't even spoken to you about? You may not even know their name, but they got expectations of you because they hear in front of your name, Minister so-and-so. And so they expect that you're going to come with something. But you have this hasty disciple. He runs to Jesus and says, look, I will follow you. And then Jesus hits him with a response. He was like, look, truth be told, he was like, look, foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Jesus was actually letting him know, he's like, dude, we moving all the time. You can't get settled walking with me. You can't get comfortable walking with me. Deacon Carpenter has his whole ministry, his whole business. Comfort can't progress. Jesus saying, I understand that you want to get to a certain place where you feel okay within me. That's great. But you can never get too settled. Because even though I called you to a thing, and it's a good thing because I called you to it, what you going to do when I tell you to move from the good thing that I called you to another thing that I'm calling you to? So now you got to weigh the option. Do I stay in the good place that God called me to the first time, or do I move to this unfamiliar place that he's calling me to? Because what is going to happen, God will remove his presence from that place. And he's already thinking that you've already made a decision and starts walking towards the new one. To the point where now you start getting frustrated in the place that he called you to. So when you're talking about following Christ, this disciple here, we don't hear anything else from him. Jesus hit him with this word, dude went ghost. Because he hit him with the hard truth. He was like, look, all these things that I've told you they have a place to go to. He said, but for me, I'm I'm not settled in one place. I have a mission in mind. This ragtail bunch that's following behind me, I'm still dealing with them. And so please understand is that I'm not going to have a place where I'm going to settle at. So are you going to be okay with that? That we're going to be constantly moving? This kind of goes back to the Old Testament when they was in the wilderness, when not necessarily Jesus, but God showed up as the pillar of fire at night. He showed up as the cloud during the day. And wherever that cloud would move, they had to move. If the cloud moved 10 feet to the right, they had to pack up everything, move 10 feet, rebuild it, and sit there till that cloud moved again. If it moved 100 miles down the road, they had to pack up everything, follow that cloud, because it was showing that dependency on God. Is that regardless of wherever you move, I'm going to go as well. But sometimes in our hastiness, we don't understand the cost that will occur. So this is the first disciple. And this is how many of us have put ourselves in these situations that we have made decisions. We have said things and made promises to God. But by the time you left church, you already reneged on it. Many of us, a lot of people, used to have New Year's resolutions. By January the 2nd, you done broke 6 of them. And so that's the reason why we can't be hasty going after these things that God has for us. We need to be able to really think about what it's going to cost. But what's so crazy about it, God is like, look, I'm always going to be there, fulfill everything that you need. I just need you to make a decision to follow after me. So then we get to the second disciple, verses 59 through 60. This is the hesitant disciple. This is the person that wants to go, but something is holding them back. Jesus says to another man, "Follow me." But the man replied, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury the dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God." This is what they call one of them hard sayings of Jesus. Because you can look at this in 2 different ways. Did the man have a father that's actually dying? Also, too, what you have to understand, in Jewish culture, especially at that time, if you're the oldest, it was your responsibility to handle all of the burial affairs of your parent. But it doesn't tell us if he's the oldest or the youngest. But then you have to think about it. It's like, would Jesus be that cold-hearted to tell a dude, like, hey, I need you to go ahead and follow me. I don't really care about your father. Jump on this bandwagon. Would he be that cold-hearted to tell you that? You have a loved one dying, and he says, you know what? They're going to die anyway. Come on and follow me. Or could he be talking about a spiritual death more so than a physical one? And what I mean by that is that there may be some people that are connected to you that are spiritually dead, that God has been telling you for a long period of time, you need to cut away from them. But you're still trying to hold on to them. You're still trying to resuscitate the relationship. And God has been trying to tell you over and over again, I need you to let them go. But instead, you're trying to be Dr. Frankenstein and create a monster that comes alive but is not actually alive. And so it could be that God or Jesus was actually telling the man, it was like, look, let the dead bury the dead. Let that spiritual situation that is dead, let it go. Follow me and proclaim my word. Because I'm a firm believer that Jesus wouldn't just be that cold-hearted and be like, hey, forget your daddy, follow me. But I could also see him on the flip side really seeing the situation at hand. It's like, look, you're dealing with a dead situation. And if you keep playing around with it, the very thing that killed them in that situation is going to leach over onto you. And so this hesitation, because a lot of us have people that we're connected to. You love them. They're your family members, your friends, whatever it may be. You love them, but you see that they're not going anywhere. And your hesitation is that I don't want to leave them behind. But then God is saying, if you don't leave, how can they see where to go? I'm trying to pull you out of the situation. Think about the example when God called Abraham. His father and them had moved and went to the city that was named after his dead brother. His father did not move. His father made up in his mind that I am not going to leave this place because the name of the city reminds me of my dead son. So I'm basically just going to stop here. But God had to tell Abraham, it's like, hey, no, I need you to go. Because if you don't, you're going to be just like your father. You're going to get stuck in a place that you should have moved on from. Now it's become your tomb. And so when we're talking about the hesitation, you have to understand is that, yes, we all are put in those situations where we become hesitant, where we don't want to move because we feel like we're going to leave somebody. But we have to understand that God is like, look, I am trying to move you into another place. And sometimes me moving you is going to hurt. The separation will hurt. But you were probably the one that's going to be the person that's going to blaze the trail for everybody else. But they can't see the trail being blazed if you're still standing there right there beside them. Then the third disciple, verses 61 through 62. The homesick disciple said, still another said, I will follow you, Lord, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family. Jesus replied, no one puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. The best example I can give you on this is like you getting in your car to leave church today, but you never look through your front windshield. You're driving, but you're constantly looking in the rearview mirror. How far do you think you're going to go? Now, I know a lot of y'all got smart cars. You got all kind of bells and whistles and stuff in your cars and everything like that. But truthfully be told, even though you have all that smart stuff in your car, you still got to put your foot on that gas or that brake. But how far would you actually go if I was to put you out on 85, but you constantly looking in the rearview mirror? And so here you have this homesick person. Now, granted, all of us have been homesick. When you graduated from high school, you're getting ready to go off to college, you go to college first couple of months or whatever, you're in college, you're feeling homesick, you're ready to come home because of the familiarity of it. Or say that you necessarily didn't go to college, but say that you're leaving out of your parents' house, you're moving into your first spot, you become homesick. Ain't that right, Kelsey? And so you become homesick because you remember the creature comforts that you had at your parents' house. For one, I ain't got rent. So I'm homesick because now I got to pay rent. Now Duke Power sending me stuff. Greenville Water. I got taxes and stuff that I didn't realize that I had taxes before. So you start becoming homesick for home. You're like, man, I want to go back home. And your parents are like, no, because I done changed the locks. So you can't come back. You got to knock now. So when you leave, go ahead and give me that key. Now you become a visitor versus a resident. But we all become homesick with stuff. You leave a job, go to another job. The change of it, correct. Like you think like, oh man, I was like, I really did have it good over there. You start feeling homesick about a job that you were sick of, Because now you're in an unfamiliar situation that you have to kind of learn all the ropes and stuff again. You got to learn new people. You got to learn different things. You be like, man, I probably did have it good over there. But the whole time you were praying to God, like, God, please deliver me from this job. There's nothing wrong with being homesick. But when your sickness of being at home overtakes what God has for you, that's when it becomes a problem. Because he says, no one who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. Anybody that has ever farmed understands that. When you're plowing a field, you plowing in straight lines. You're looking dead ahead. 9 times 10, like if you had horses or mules or whatever, you're looking at the back end of that horse and the mule the whole time. Because the moment you turn around, you veer off. And so now you got to spend more time trying to get this horse or this mule or these bulls back in line to back up to get back to where you was going. And so what Jesus is telling this disciple, he's like, look, what you got to understand. He said, if you really want to follow me, he said, first and foremost, like, you got to be moving in the same direction that I'm moving in. You can't keep looking back. You have that sometimes even in church. People always say, well, back in the day, we used to do this. This ain't back in the day. This is not 1973. What we did in the 70s, we can't do in the 21st century. Now, there's certain aspects that may have been done that we can still hold on to. But we have to change the methods of how we're getting this thing across. And so you hear that a lot in families. Oh, well, we used to do this. We used to do that. We ain't doing that no more. And so what Jesus is trying to get us to understand with these 3 disciples, all 3 of these individuals you never hear from again. They had a prime opportunity. Now, granted, they are mentioned in the Bible. They're not mentioned by name, but the action that they had with Jesus is mentioned in the Bible. But you never hear of these individuals again. We don't know what became of them. We don't know what's going on. But the thing is, they had an interaction with Christ and still chose not to follow him. And that's something that we should pay close attention to. If these 3 individuals ghosted Jesus, how many times have we done it? Because you got to understand, salvation wasn't given then. Jesus ain't died. Salvation wasn't even on the table. The resurrection ain't even taking place yet. All of us that have received salvation now have a relationship with Christ. But even within your relationship, how many times have Jesus asked you to do something and you ghosted it? But then come back 2 weeks later praying about something. But because he's such a loving God that he still looks at us versus how we would look at people, let somebody ghost you and then come back and ask for something. You ain't spoke to this person in a year. Then all of a sudden they show back up and it's like, hey, Jazz, I need some help with something. Now, I don't know what Jazz may say. Might be a couple of 4-letter words thrown in there, whatever the situation, depending upon how the situation ended. But person ain't spoke to you in a year. Then they come back asking for something. How are you going to respond? But we do the same thing to Jesus all the time. He's telling us, I need you to do this. But you say, nah, I'm really going to do this. Or I'm not going to do it at all. No, God, you ain't talking to me. You must be talking to the person sitting beside me. No, I'm talking to you. But we push it off on somebody else. Oh, no, somebody else to do that. Sean sent something out for the women's ministry saying, hey, we need help with this. God had been dealing with you for 2 months. Hey, you need to get involved in something. Opportunity comes, you're like, I'm not really going to do that. And so we do it to God. Just as you see the example that happened in the Bible, we do it to him as well. We're either the hasty individual, we jump into stuff real quick and don't count the cost whatsoever. You know you can't swim, but why you over here on the 12-foot end? You see everybody else swimming and everything. You say, oh, well, I can do it too. No, you need to go back over here to 3 feet. You're the hesitant individual. You don't want to lead people, but God is saying, I need you to move over here. But you trying to take everybody and pack them all in your car. And he's been telling you, hey, you need to let this person go. You need to remove this relationship. You need to distance yourself from this. But you're still trying to bring everybody along with you. So you basically Abraham bringing Lot. And then when you get to where God has you to go, the person that you brought with you, now you got to separate from. When God told you, I didn't tell you to bring him in the first place. Or we become the last one, the homesick individual. God is trying to push you. And you steady fighting him. It's like, nah, I'm good right here. I like this. I like this comfort. I like just being here. And God is saying, no, I need you to go. It's no different than when you see, like I watch National Geographic stuff a lot, especially like with eagles. When they get ready to, when a baby eagle gets to the point where it's ready to be, it's literally kicked out the nest. It's like a fight. Because that eaglet is holding on, trying not to leave that nest, and the parent is steadily nudging them to the cliff. Because they was like, if I don't get you to fly, you never will. And I can't afford to keep feeding you. Because you've gotten to the point where now you can sustain yourself. And so I literally have to just push you on out the nest. And God does the same thing as well. He pushes you out of your comfort zone. This election that I went through, matter of fact, April was there, one of the places I had to go to. And it was rough being in there. You know the one we had to go to the church, and I had to speak. And when I say it was, I was sitting there praying the whole time. I said, okay, this is way out of my comfort zone. And I was like, God, you got to give me at least 3 people to connect with. I said, I don't need the whole room. I just need 3. And one of the individuals that one of the main vocal individuals in the room was one of the ones that connected with me. But it was really God showing me, it was like, look, dude, wherever you go, I'm there with you. I just need to push you a little bit to make sure that you didn't get stuck in your comfort zone, that you didn't get stuck being in certain rooms where everybody thinks like you. So I'm going to have to put you in situations where everybody in the room does not think like you, to the point where you have to literally change your entire speech so that you don't hit key words like diversity. Because I knew the moment I said that, everything was going to shut off. And so he's changing everything that I'm saying as I'm getting up to that podium to talk. And I was like, okay, none of these people are probably going to vote for me. But I just need 3 people just to connect so that I can make it through this thing. But what is so significant about all of this is that what we have to understand, the reason why people ghost individuals, why we ghost God a lot of times, is because we don't like to deal with the tension. What you have to understand, in life will be tension. There's 2 ways you can deal with tension. First one is that you don't deal with it at all. You ghost the situation. You be like, look, I ain't really want to deal with it, so I'm just going to let it go. The The problem with that is that it ends up festering. And it ends up becoming a bigger issue down the road because you failed to deal with that tension right then and there. But then the second way that you deal with tension is just like when you go work out. If you go work out and you leave that workout session and you're not sore, you didn't work out. You might have sweated a little bit, but you was just there. A workout is to cause tension within your body. That's the reason why your muscles are sore. Because it's breaking your muscles down to build them back up, because your muscles, your body knows like, hey, you putting me under some tension that I'm not used to. So I'm going to build myself up so the next time you deal with this, I'm able to handle that weight. Because that's why when you look at Philippians 3 and 14, when Paul is talking about it, he says, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. What he's saying, he said, I'm pressing toward it, meaning that I am allowing myself to go through some tension to go after this goal, which is in Christ. So the reason why we can't afford to get ghost on God is because we waste so much time. You spend your time going around in circles. God is not like the educational system. He's not going to promote you because you're a certain age. You will be 52 still dealing with stuff that a 12-year-old is dealing with spiritually because you failed to deal with the tension. God is saying, I'm not going to promote you because you done outgrew or outaged yourself out of that. Like, no, you will stay there till you ain't here no more. And so when we're able to allow ourselves to be put into a situation to deal with it, no different than like everybody always uses this whole saying, is like, oh, I'm staying 10 toes down in it. Really? If that was the case, a lot of the issues that we have, we wouldn't have. But God is saying, look, I need you to be able to stand firm in what I'm calling you into, because there's going to be times where it's like everything is coming against you. And you have that flight or fight response that raises up in you. It's like either I fight it or I run from it. And God is saying, look, it's time out from running from it. I need you to start fighting. Whatever you're trying to achieve, whatever you're trying to get to, whatever you're trying to do within your life, whatever legacy you're trying to build for your family, for those that are connected to you, God is saying, I need you to be present. It's time out from us just not showing up. Not only do you need to be present physically, you need to be present mentally and spiritually at the same time. You have to be checked in. If anything has taught us from coming out of this pandemic, these last 3 years and stuff, is that you don't know what is coming around the corner. So why be caught blindsided when God is saying, I'm giving you time now to prepare yourself for whatever is getting ready to come. But I need you to be present. I don't need you ghosting out on people. People need you. They're dependent on you. So you can't go missing. There's a difference when you have to take some time just to recharge yourself. That's one thing. But we're talking about when you just go missing. People trying to call you, people trying to reach out to you, because what'll end up happening, they'll stop calling you. They'll stop coming to you. Then you wondering why, like, well, where everybody go? You left them first. They're doing exactly what you did to them. Amen? Amen. Stand to your feet.